We don't even have a dining table in the kitchen anymore. And instead we have a kiddie table and all of us sit around the kiddie table, like
I
in these tiny
love
chairs.
that.
So when they're a little bit older, we'll pull our old table back, but at least it gives them, they're equals to us. They're not
Yes.
in a high chair where they can't get out.
Welcome back to Amplify with the Jess Extra, where we amplify your ideas, your influence, and your income. It is a rainy, gloomy day here in Raleigh, but we are about to bring the sunshine with our guest, Hazel Sy. We found Hazel because a woman on our team, a new mom, stumbled across Hazel's TED Talk, and it spoke to every doubt, fear, and concern she had about being a working parent. Not only are we a super fan of Hazel and her talk, but she is also now an alumni of Mic Drop Academy. Hazel is a Fortune 500 executive, a board member, and a powerful advocate for working parents. She has lived the experience many of us know, the tug of war between being a devoted parent and a committed professional. In this conversation, we're going to talk about how she pushed through the guilt of being a working mom, the emotional journey of creating a powerful TED Talk, and the surprising ways that motherhood has changed her as a leader and a speaker. So let's start at the beginning of her story, when Hazel's plan for childcare fell through, a time I know all too well, and she was forced to find another way.
We had a plan, right? Initially, my in-laws were going to move closer to us. So they were going to move all the way from Long Island over to New Jersey in order to live close to us to help watch the kids. And it all happened in such a whirlwind because when the time came, my in-laws are they're older. And so my mother-in-law took me aside and said, we're kind of old now, and it's really hard to keep up with twins, like two kids running around at the same time. And so we don't think we can do this. And here I was about to go back to work. I had maybe 4 to 6 weeks or so to figure out an alternative, like finding a daycare.
Wow.
What am I going to do? Who even has an opening right now? So that there was a huge shock to me in the moment. And that kind of started the whole process, right? But the one thing that I found and why I felt compelled to do the talk was because I would, similar to what you said about talking to Jane, I always had these thoughts in my mind. How do I juggle both work and a career that I was always 150% into it with kids, feeling the guilt of leaving them at home or putting them in daycare? Honestly, I kept asking myself, should I quit? And I find it's a question that many of us ask ourselves. And then I realized I was using up so much energy and brain power and this energy that could be going elsewhere, always revisiting this question and questioning myself if I was doing the right thing.
Yeah. And what, I guess, was there like, okay, so you eventually did find a daycare.
I did.
What was the entry like for you? Because it didn't go, if anything, it magnified when Ellie started going to daycare. I felt, especially because they're kids and they have a tough adjustment. I would cry, sit in my car and cry every day when I put her in there. And I'm like, is what I'm doing worth it? Again, should I quit? What was it like for you, that adjustment when that started?
So I think initially it was a bit hard, where I was figuring out the hours even, right? So I used to be able to come home at any time, 8 p.m., even 9 p.m. whenever needed, because there was nothing waiting for me or nothing I had to like go do. And when they were in daycare, literally there was one time I remember I had to call my sister. I'm like, could you please pick the kids up from daycare? She didn't have car seats, so she had to just sit in her car waiting with them until I got there, like 30
Oh my
minutes
gosh.
later,
Yeah.
because they were going to close, right? And daycare tells you, okay, if you don't pick up this many minutes after the pickup time, we're going to call child support. So they made sure the parents actually came. Yeah, so it was a bit
That's
stressful.
a bold threat. Oh
It worked though. It worked.
Yes. Yes. So, you had a really interesting stat in your TED Talk, and you can probably say it better than me, but childcare, the cost of it is like working minimum wage full time from January to June.
Yeah. And
am I saying that right?
yes, and it's
Insane.
and that's even before the childcare cliff. So one of the reasons why I started questioning, like, oh no, am I doing the right thing to giving this talk, was here I was advocating to put kids in childcare, which is controversial enough as it is in terms of being judged as a mom.
Mhm.
But then the childcare cliff was happening where a lot of the government support that supplemented childcare costs was going away. It was happening right about like within a few month period. And so it's really hard where a lot of people I know, that's another thing we talk about is it worth staying to
Yeah.
work? And maybe we should quit if all of our income or a significant portion of income is going towards childcare. And I think that was really key though, because part of what gave me this aha moment that I wanted to share with the world, and something that gave me this sense of peace ultimately, was I was having a conversation one afternoon with my friend, and we were talking about things like this, like, wow, it's, like we're very lucky, we're not working at minimum wage, but it was eating up a good chunk of our take home pay. And in the conversation though, we talked about how in the few years that she did continue working, because her child was still quite young, like 4, I think, that she had actually moved up in her career and moved to the next level
Mhm.
while doing all this. And so one of the things we talked about was, yes, even maybe today it's costing us quite a large portion of our income, but by continuing to work, we're continuing to move up in our career, and in a way it's a financial investment back into ourselves that will
Mhm.
move up in our career and make more money later on.
But it's an investment financially. You
Mhm.
also called it preserving your sense of self,
Yeah.
which I think is probably not talked about enough. Like, yes, there's definitely a financial upside to working, but also there's a personal upside if you choose that. Can you talk about what the um, personal side of that investment looks like? And because usually we don't talk about the payoff there.
And I think it's because we don't really talk a lot as a culture about self-identity, and how we think of a lot of times in the Western world, we think of our identity wrapped up in our career. Many
Mm,
times, if you go to a party and let's say you're not working and people ask you, what do? You feel really awkward, right? Like, I don't
mhm.
know what to say because that my identity is so tied up in that. And um, throughout my life, I always thought like I could do anything, I can be anything I want, right? All I have to do is apply myself. And when I found myself in the moment of not having enough time, getting pulled between, especially when they're quite young, when they're
Mhm.
on 3 and under, right? You can't leave them alone. And so it was the work time as well as being a mom, there was no time for myself. And I had so many passions, even beyond my career, that I wanted to do. I remember there was even this one time, and it, like, every time I think of it, it makes me have this like deep sadness. I
Mm.
was looking at my daughter who was sleeping, and like this thought came to me of like, well, maybe this is what I was meant to do. This is
Mm.
why I'm here in the world, to create this child or these children, because they're the ones who's going to do something amazing. And
Mhm.
that made that like, even now talking about it, it breaks my
Yeah.
heart to think that I almost gave up on myself and what I
Mhm.
felt like I could do and achieve.
Yeah. And the thing is that, going to your like and statement is,
Mm.
what if that is also true? That so much of your purpose is building your kids to be great humans who are going to change the world. And they can also watch you do it. That doesn't have to mean staying at home. Like I have said this before, where I'm choosing part of my husband and I have talked about, like, part of my parenting philosophy that I'm choosing, which everyone can choose their own, is I want to have my kids see me trying. I want them to see me go try to build something. I want them to see me fail at something. I want them to, my daughter has her little computer that doesn't work and she comes and works, beside me. And I'm like, I like that she sees me building something. So can you talk about the like mother and the extension of that? Because that healed something in me when I heard you talk about it.
There's so many layers to that mother and in the sense, so one of the layers is that I'm very thoughtful about how I talk about my time away from my children to my children. So if
Mm,
I'm working on something like working on a talk, for example, taking a course, I say mom has to study. I purposely don't use the word work because I don't want them to grow up thinking I'm supposed to be a workaholic, right?
oh,
Like
interesting.
so I
Yeah.
call it study actually. I give it, I separate it. And I also do things to expose my children to seeing me. So for
Mm,
example, I didn't have them watch my TED talk because they can understand it. And I think there's some parts of it I don't want them to feel guilty about at such a young
mm,
age. They'll understand when they're older. However, I was emceeing an event nearby that was kid friendly. So I had them come and they got to watch me up on stage talking to people. I'm taking an improv class. When we do our final improv show, I want them to come and watch me just so that they were like, mom's doing it. So I want to do it.
mhm,
Because as you know, as a parent, as a mother, your children adore you. They look up to you and they think like you're the world, you're amazing, and they want to be just like you. And
mhm.
so it's really important to me that whatever they want to be just like is something I would want them to be like.
There's an interesting comment in the chat from Dana, and I'm curious your take on it. And she said, I wonder how many dads are having these conversations.
Mhm.
What was this like with your, I can speak from my experience, but with you too, what was it like with your partner? Did they have the same tug of war? Was it easier? Was it harder? What was that like?
It's in the beginning, I think naturally when they were much younger, at least in our household, I tended to pick up a bigger part of it just because I was the one on maternity leave and it just started
Mm,
that way. Over time, though, we started splitting the work for the children, and I did find that when we got into that swing of things starting to become stable as our kids got older, my husband didn't re-pick up the
mm,
things that he used to do. And so that's part of one of the things we've been talking about. Like he loves photography, and I was pushing him again, like, "Oh, when are you going to contact the photographer that you're going to do some work with?" Right? Because it is so easy to, even if you do have the time, it is so easy to just fall back into some sort of routine
mhm.
and not come back. But in terms of how many dads are having talks like this, I'm not sure. I don't think society, at least from my experiences, I don't think society sets the same expectations. Like I'll hear my friends say, if I hear someone say to my husband that, "Are you babysitting the kids this weekend?" I'm gonna pull it back because they're not babysitting; it's their children, right?
Yeah.
I think it's changed, but there's still a little bit of.
There was some award show that happened last night, and can't remember what it was, but and then Machine Gun Kelly was like on the red carpet saying, "Oh, my daughter is sick, so I'm just here to walk the red carpet, and then I'm gonna go home after this. I'm gonna skip the show and like be with her." And I like ran to the comments. I'm like, "What are people saying?" And it was like the bare minimum applause that some of these men get for like, for doing again just kind of the bare minimum, but it is so okay, AMAs, thank you, someone in the chat said it, but it is so applauded because it is not where I'm like, a mom might not even go to the red carpet, not even tell anyone that this is happening. They're just going to be there. And I'm not saying this is like a uh men versus women and trying to put it in these buckets, but it's just societal and historic expectations that even in some of the most progressive households, which I consider my household very progressive, no one was asking my husband, "What are you going to do, when the kids get here?" But everyone was asking me, "Are you going to keep speaking? Are you going to keep doing this? What's going to happen, when the kids are here?" But he wasn't getting that same kind of questioning, which even that in its just the dialogue around it is different.
And I find that even as women, we are part of that dialogue, right?
Mhm.
We're the ones asking other women, what are you going to do as well?
Yes.
And so sometimes I catch myself, am I just, continuing it by even asking versus why don't I assume that they're going to continue working?
Mhm. Yes. I kind of run through in my head now. I'm like, if I'm going to ask it to the woman, I'm also going to ask it to the man. Like, and if I wouldn't, then I'm not going to say it because I wouldn't want that, for me. But there are some things that, of course, women uniquely go through, like birth or carrying a child, that is great to be able to have someone to talk about that with. But even just like when you try so much to be egalitarian and 50-50 household, um, there's just history and biology that can override it. Heather said dads are applauded for leaving to coach the soccer team and mom gets the eye roll for running a kid to the orthodontist. 100% true. So have you read the comments on your TED Talk? I don't know if you're like me and you don't read them. Have you read them? They're so
I
good.
have, and and there are some that are like, why are you going to, why are you taking care of animals instead of your kids, right? So that was part, and this writing the talk was really, we talked about how society will question it because I didn't think only that men would say something. I thought women. I actually worried more from the backlash from women
Oh, interesting.
because I wondered, there's two sides of it. One is, am I going to get a backlash from women who choose to stay home, which is
Hmm.
totally fine. I was
Yeah.
just positioning as if you want to go back to work or you
Yes.
want to do something else.
Choice. Yeah.
Which is why I very consciously emphasized in my talk the projects that I have versus saying this lets me work longer hours, because that wasn't the point.
Interesting. Yeah.
And and I even ran the talk by a friend of mine who is a full-time mom. And I said, does this like
How does this land?
irritate you in any
Yeah.
way or seem
Yeah.
like I'm attacking you? And she said, no, because even as a full-time mom, it reminds me to take time away for me to do what I enjoy, right? What I'm
Mm-hmm.
passionate about. It doesn't prevent me from doing that just because I'm not working.
Right.
And then on the other side is people who are going to say, why are you having someone else take care of your children? And that is, I just tell myself, this is a snippet of my life.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see the whole thing. And if they saw the whole thing, they might not say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that sense of, I value quality over quantity when it comes to my children. So I will set the phone on the side. I actually rarely ever look at it when I'm with my kids. And also, I'm very big into conscious parenting as well as Montessori. And so for example, we took away our dining table in the kitchen. We don't even have a dining table in the kitchen anymore. And instead, we have a kiddie table, and all of us sit around the kiddie table, like
I
in these tiny
love that.
chairs. So when they're a little bit older, we'll pull our old table back, but at least it gives them, they're equals to us. They're not
Yes.
in a high chair where they can't get out.
Oh, I love that. And, I think whenever you give a talk, it's like you do run it through what would the critics say. And that's something we teach in Mic Drop Academy too, is like right off the bat, speak to the critic and who, might be someone made up in your head of someone saying, why are you taking care of animals more than you're taking care of your kids, which is hilarious, by the way. And, I think you did that so well in your TED Talk where it wasn't about like working moms being something aspirational. It was purely just if this is what you choose to do, which that's what I think. I did a video, when Harrison Butker did his speech, the commencement address saying that like something around women aspirationally should be at home. And I think one of the reasons why it was so widely divisive was because people who spoke out against it were also portrayed as being against staying at home, when really it's all about just being able to have that choice if you want to,
Yeah.
which you did that so beautifully in your TED Talk. So tell me, I know this is a gear shift, but we are speakers here that listen to this, a lot of us, the road to TED for you. And then you had kind of quite a lot go wrong the day of, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
So the road to TED. So first of all, for what even the TEDx talk itself was one of the things that epitomized my talk or my
Mm,
idea, because I actually had always thought since I was younger, it would be cool to do a TED talk. And it was one of those aspirational goals that you never think you're going to achieve. So the
mhm.
fact that I went after it was already a big deal to me. I had no plans to be a speaker afterwards or to do anything with it, but I just wanted to share this idea once I had it. And the process for TEDx Talks is you apply to each event separately. And I think I'd applied like 67 at this point with all rejections and no's. That was quite a learning for me because you have to get used to putting yourself out there and getting the no's.
Yep.
That this applies to everything in life. But literally, the day that I was telling somebody, I don't think this is ever going to happen, was that day I got the acceptance into Danville, to
Oh
get to
my
Danville. Like
gosh.
it, I don't know. I guess the timing was like the second I was about to give up, that's when I got
Yes.
the acceptance.
Oh, I love
And
that.
then leading up to the TEDx talk was really hard, which I can imagine happens for any speaker on any platform, because I was creating my talk, but I was talking to a lot of people to get their input, talking to a speaker coach, talking to my friends, etc. And this is a very charged topic that a lot of people have strong opinions about. And
Mhm.
so after a while, I felt like this was no longer my voice or my idea because everybody kept trying to insert their ideas into it. And so I got really frustrated, maybe 3 months of doing that. Finally, at that point, I set it aside and I said, okay, I'm going to start with a blank paper. Now that I've gotten all that feedback, I'm going to start with a blank paper. I'm not going to talk to anybody about this for 2 weeks. And I'm just going to write from the heart
Mhm.
and write what my idea is and what I want to say. And I think that worked really well because one person told me, which was amazing. He said, "Look, you want to make sure if you fail because it was you and your idea,
Mhm.
not that you
Yes.
didn't fail because it was someone else's." And that's what gave me the courage to like scrap it, start all over, because I had to submit my talk script within I was 4 weeks away. So I finished it 2 weeks before the deadline of a complete rewrite. So it was very
Mhm.
tight, but I think it was worth it.
It was
And
100% worth it for
yeah,
sure. And if anyone hasn't watched Hazel's TED Talk, Jane will put it in the chat. She's also going to put in, you have a go-to speaker prep checklist, which is awesome. I want to end with, you're a speaker, you're a thought leader, and doing some amazing things. How did motherhood shift your stance on being a thought leader? I know for me, it provided more depth in my emotion, and like I just didn't know I could be that happy and that sad. I feel like I was living my life between like a 4 and a 7, and motherhood I now live in a 1 and a 10, which changes the way I show up on stage and with people. I'm curious, how did motherhood change you as a thought leader?
so I would say motherhood made me more intentional.
Mm,
I'm more thoughtful about all of my choices and all of my actions. I think because in my day to day now, anything I do or think will affect another person, right? These little people
yeah.
who can't, who don't have full control of everything that's going on, and that intentionality really changes how I show up for people. It also helps me connect more deeply with the people that I interact with, that I work with, and even just a lot of the conscious parenting. Like I always thought if I did another TEDx talk, I talk about how conscious parenting applies to work.
Mm,
Because a lot of the skills that I learned of dealing with a 2-year-old, granted, people are a lot older in the workplace, but ultimately we're all humans and we have the
yep.
same basic human needs. And so it even helps me with that.
Totally. There was something like, I don't even know what it's called, but instead of telling my daughter what to do, I give her two choices. I'm like, okay, do you want to sit over here or do you want to stand over here to eat your dinner instead of eat your dinner, you know? And I find like my husband and I do that with each other. Now I'm like, do you want to go take out the trash or do you want to unload the dishwasher? Which one do you want to do? And then we catch ourselves. I'm like, are you gentle parenting me right now?
It works better for influence, right?
It works. Hazel, you're amazing. Where else can everyone find you along with watching your TED Talk?
Definitely just LinkedIn here, as well as Instagram and Facebook, the Hazel SY. But otherwise, you'll catch me at different events and talks. I'll be posting about it on the feed. So thank you
You're
so much for
amazing.
having me, Jess. And
Thanks,
I'm
Hazel.
so appreciative to be in your world as well now through MDA.
Oh, good. Thank you. And you have some of your MDA cohort fans in the chat. So I love it.
That was the
Thanks,
best part, one of
everyone.
the best parts, the community. So thank you for
Oh,
that.
I love it. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Amplify. If you're a fan of the show, show us some podcast love by giving us a rating and review. This episode is brought to you by Mic Drop Workshop, where you can learn how to become a better speaker, how to land paid speaking gigs, and become a keynote speaker. This episode was edited and produced by Walk West. I'm Jess Ekstrom, reminding you that you deserve the biggest stage, so let's find out how to get you there. I'll see you again soon.